Hello, everyone. It's Dustin with Name the Unknown, where our mission is to disciple Christian men through shoulder to shoulder training in rigorous Bible study, apologetics, and evangelism. In this video, I will be sharing some evangelism tips to better equip you to proclaim the faith of Christ to others. Before we jump into these tips, I do want to note that the best way to learn how to do evangelism is to watch it being done and to do it yourself. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first. So I want to encourage you not to wait until you feel like you're perfectly prepared to start sharing your faith. Get out with another believer and just start doing it. That being said, a small group of believers who I was doing street evangelism with in the summer have decided that during these colder months we would focus on evangelism training and practice to make us that much sharper once we get back out on the streets. That has been fruitful, so I thought it would multiply the fruit to share some of what we've been going over in these trainings here online. I did one previous video in this series, and in that video I shared the steps, the first steps in our training, which was simply practicing active listening, and then summarizing what the speaker said, and lastly asking them why the speaker made a certain claim. This is a simple way to ensure we have the maximal amount of information to work with regarding what someone believes and that we do not misrepresent or misunderstand what they believe. This is simply the Socratic method. It's the bread and butter of the Socratic method. Be genuinely curious and ask lots of questions. It's a wonderful way to get the conversation going and to establish a good rapport before you begin to challenge them. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is how to start leading the conversation somewhere. Curiosity and questions are great, but remember the ultimate goal of evangelism is to represent and proclaim Christ. In a book I would recommend on this subject called Tactics by Greg Koukl, the author expresses a view I share. You don't need to feel pressured to get someone to the foot of the cross in every evangelism conversation. Look, God is sovereign. Our job is to simply be faithful ambassadors, ready to give a defense of the hope that is within us. That being said, we do want to have the ability to guide the conversation to the subject of the cross if we have an audience who is willingly giving us their time and attention. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is how to start leading the conversation somewhere. So let's jump in. The basic flow for a good Socratic conversation is to initially 1. Listen, 2. Summarize, and 3. Ask clarifying questions. So let's dig into some specific examples of ways to seek clarification, learn more about your speaker's view, and to push the conversation into deeper waters. So here are some everyday comments you might hear in regular conversation. You might hear something like, I had a great day today, or I don't like my mom, or I didn't vote. Just throwaway statements that you may typically hear. And what do we normally respond with to these kinds of comments? Well, not usually questions. Most people, most of the time, they seem to respond with statements back, sharing a story for a story. You'd say something and I'll say something back. For example, someone who says, I had a great day today. You might say, I had a great day too. Glad to hear you had a good day. Or someone says, I don't like my mom. You might respond with, yeah, my relationship with my mom is strained also. Parents are the worst. Someone says, I didn't vote. You might say, yeah, I didn't vote either. Seems pointless. It's just sharing statement for statement, right? A quick and easy way to make these responses better and to take the conversation deeper is to simply ask why. Why did you have a great day? Why don't you like your mom? Why didn't you vote? There are some variations you can use too, right? The why is the simple way to put it, but sometimes just simply asking why can put a little bit more pressure on that conversation than you would like, especially if it's early in the conversation. And if you're not sure your speaker wants to go deeper, in that case, you can try something like this. Someone says, I had a great day today. Instead of just saying, well, why did you have a great day? Say, well, I'm glad to hear you had a great day. What happened? Okay, it's a little softer, not so much pressure on your speaker there. Someone says, I don't like my mom. You can say, yeah, relationships with parents can be tough. Have you always had a strained relationship with your mom? Someone says, I didn't vote. Yeah, I didn't used to vote either. Have you ever voted before in the past? There are kind of variations on why, but you're not quite asking why. Essentially, these responses include a phrase at the beginning to relate to them or affirm something that they said. And then there's a question that's basically just inviting them to say more. It's essentially just It's as if you're saying, oh, tell me more about that. And sometimes you can simply use that. Well, yeah, tell me more. So this type of a question will help earlier in the conversation. It'll help you to feel out whether they are open to going deeper, and it allows you to more directly challenge their thinking down the line in the conversation. So at this point, I do want to pause and recognize two things. So as we're breaking down conversations like this, you should realize these tips are useful in regular conversation, not just evangelism, not just street evangelism, but any kind of conversation with your barber, conversation with your family. These tips are really just conversation tips. So they apply outside of evangelism as well, and they apply in making a just regular everyday conversation potentially lead to some sort of spiritual discussion also. So that's thing number one I want to pause and recognize. This is helpful just for conversation. Thing number two that I want to recognize is that these tips are very abstract. We're breaking down conversations in a ways you're not going to be breaking conversations down this way when you're actually talking. You're not going to be saying, okay, step one is listen, and okay, now I'm going to summarize what they said. You're probably not going to be thinking through these steps in a real conversation. So I just want to say the point of breaking these things down step by step like this is with the number one goal to have you be confident that you can have difficult conversations about contentious topics, and you can do so easily, casually, and with a calm and gentle spirit. So that's my main goal with breaking these down, is not to give you a blueprint step by step, this is exactly how I'm going to do it, but just to simply explain that these conversations are more than possible. Okay, so I just wanted to say that at this point. So to summarize, here we have the three initial steps to any good conversation. You're going to listen. Number two, you're going to summarize. And number three, you're going to ask why, or for some kind of clarification. Ask them to tell you more. So after a while of doing this, you're going to feel like you've gathered a sufficient amount of information about what your speaker believes on whatever your topic is. At this point, you will feel confident that you can represent their beliefs accurately and fairly. You can say what they think, and they would agree with you that what you've said is, in fact, what they believe. And preferably, you don't only know what they believe, but why they believe it. So unless you have nothing to disagree with, it is at this point you will want to begin to get them to think about alternatives to their own viewpoint. This is where you would begin to gently challenge them and ideally get them to consider the possibility that they may be wrong and why they may be wrong. So the Socratic method will again be an extremely useful and extremely easy tool here. So we're going to challenge our speaker simply by asking more questions. So essentially, you're now going to make a statement, but phrase it as a question, right? So again, we're remembering we feel very confident that we know essentially what they think, hopefully why they think that about whatever topic we're discussing. We've got as much of their mind in our own as possible, and now we realize there's something we disagree with. So now we're gonna. Your instinct is going to want to say something to contradict what they believe, right? If you're discussing something contentious and there's something there you disagree with, you're going to want to just say the disagreement. You're wrong and here's why. But I want to challenge us to, instead of just outright saying some kind of contradictory statement to whatever their claim is, phrase it as a question. So these are going to sound something like, well, have you ever considered? Have you ever thought about? Or have you ever heard? So for example, someone says, women don't get paid as much as men. There's a gender pay gap. A bad response would be, well, actually, that's not true at all. There's no such thing as a gender pay gap. That's just made up by the liberal media. Now, I'm not saying this is right, this is true or false, but I'm just saying that's not the world's greatest response, right? Because they're going to basically tune that out and just mark you down as, well, it's someone who just wants to debate. I don't want to have anything to do with them. So here's a better response. Instead of just throwing that contradictory claim at them, you can say something like this. Have you ever heard about how that statistic about the gender pay gap, it doesn't take into account different job titles or length of time that they've held their job? So you're essentially saying something that contradicts what they believe, but you're phrasing it as a question. It's a little less combative, it's more conversational, and here's a kicker too that I think is really beneficial of this type of a method, especially for someone who's new to having these kinds of conversations. If you phrase some of your statements as questions like this, it actually allows for, if you're not actually correct on something, it allows them to contribute correction without it turning into a debate. It's less embarrassing for you if you do happen to have gotten something wrong, because you're saying, well, have you ever heard? And if they say, no, yeah, I have heard, but I thought I heard it this other way. And, oh yeah, okay, you're right. It becomes more of a conversation, and they're contributing something, and you're open to being, potentially corrected. You're not just saying something and just that's the way it is. That's a conversation. Is we're here to learn from each other. So here's another example. So let's say someone says the Bible's made up. It's all fairy tales. Well, the worst response would be to just say, no, it's not. A little bit of a better response, but still not the best response. A better response would be to say, well, actually, the New Testament, for example, was written by people who knew Jesus personally within living memory of the actual events it records. So that's better, but again, you're just saying something back to what they made a claim, you made a claim back. Let's have a conversation. So here's what I think would be like the best type of response is something like, well, have you ever heard about how the New Testament came about? I'd love to share with you if you haven't heard of that. It was actually written by people who knew Jesus personally, etc., etc. Or you could say, have you ever heard about the fact that the New Testament was written by people who knew Jesus personally and within living memory of the events it records? Had you ever heard that? Less combative. It allows them into the conversation, and it's actually prompting them for a response. You're saying something, but as you're saying it, you're asking for them to say something back. Have you ever heard this? So not only are you given the opportunity to kind of make a claim, make some statements, but in one fell swoop, you're not only making a statement, but you're asking them for a response in a very gentle way. So now you know how to not only listen, summarize, and ask clarifying questions in order to know what your speaker believes. You now know how to start leading that conversation and getting your speaker to consider the truths you're out to defend. I will do at least one more video where I'm going to share how to wade through a longer form monologue or a rant that someone might give you. Often they do when you're out doing street evangelism. We've been kind of practicing with sort of one-liners, things like that. But what do you do when someone just dumps a bunch on you? How do we respond in that case when they've got a dozen different claims? You can subscribe to this channel and catch that next video to find out. So I sure would appreciate you just drop a like on this video, comment. It's going to help us to romance that algorithm and get this content out there to fellow believers who may need some help in evangelism. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and God bless.